Resident Evil 4. Remake looks like the same game. Same village, same president's daughter, same merchant with the same coat. But under the surface, Capcom rebuilt almost everything, and some of these changes completely redefine how the game plays. Today I'm breaking down every major difference between the original and the remake, starting with the one that hits you in the first 5 minutes. Knife, parry, and stealth mechanics. In 2005, Leon's knife was basically a box cutter. You pulled it out to break crates, maybe finish off a downed Ganado, and that was it. Zero defensive capability, zero upgrades, infinite durability because it barely mattered enough to need a limit. The remake turned that thing into the backbone of your entire defensive toolkit. There's now a dedicated parry that lets you intercept Ganado swings, crossbow bolts, and here's the kicker, chainsaw attacks. In the original, Dr. Salvador touches you with that chainsaw and you're watching a death animation. No counterplay. In the remake, a perfectly timed parry deflects even that, which is, you know, not ideal for the chainsaw's self-esteem, but fantastic for yours. The trade-off is durability. Every parry, every slash, every stealth takedown drains a visible durability bar. When it breaks, you're scrounging for disposable knives or paying the merchant for repairs. That parry that saved your life, it's going to cost you pesetas later. The knife is also fully upgradable now across power and durability tiers. The original gave you 0 knife upgrades. 0. Then there's stealth. The original had none. You walked into a room and everything aggroed. The remake lets Leon crouch and perform instant stealth takedowns on unaware enemies, adding a whole pre-combat phase that simply didn't exist before. Most arenas still escalate into open combat no matter what. So stealth thins the herd rather than replacing the fight. But if you think a new knife is a big deal, wait until you see what they did to Leon's legs. Movement and combat mobility. This is the change that everything else is built on. In the original Resident Evil 4, Leon had to stop moving to aim his weapon. Full stop. You planted your feet, raised the gun, and hoped nothing was already too close. The remake throws that entire philosophy out and gives you full, modern third-person shooter controls. Strafing, backpedaling, aiming while moving. It feels like a completely different game, because mechanically, it is. But here's the thing. Capcom didn't just hand players more freedom and call it a day. They rebuilt enemy behavior from the ground up to match. Ganados flank more aggressively. Projectiles are tuned to hit moving targets. And if you think you can just hold backward on the stick and shoot forever, the game will punish you for it. There's also a dedicated crouch button now, which does triple duty. Stealth movement, ducking under attacks, and changing Leon's silhouette behind cover. None of this existed in 2005, and a huge chunk of the old QTE dodge prompts, gone. Replaced by actual player-driven movement, crouch evasion, and parry timing. You're in control during the moments that matter, not mashing a button prompt during a cutscene. Even basic traversal got an overhaul. Vaulting, jumping through windows, climbing ladders, all faster and smoother. And enemies follow you more aggressively now, so climbing a ladder isn't the free vacation it used to be. The village siege is where you really feel it. More kiting routes, vertical escapes, constant repositioning under pressure instead of backing into a corner and praying. But if you think a crouch button and some smoother movement are the biggest upgrades to Leon's toolkit, wait until you see what they did with the merchant. The merchant and request system. In the original Resident Evil 4, the merchant was simple. You walked up, you bought guns, you upgraded guns, you sold treasures, you left. He had maybe 6 lines of dialogue and 0 expectations of you beyond having enough pesetas. Mechanically, he was a vending machine with a trench coat. A beloved vending machine, but a vending machine nonetheless. The remake turns him into something closer to an informal quest giver, and it does this without breaking his mystique even a little. Blue notes now appear pinned throughout the environments. Each one a request from the merchant himself. Destroy a set of blue medallions. Hunt down a specific mini-boss creature lurking off the main path. Retrieve a rare item from an area you'd normally sprint past. They're all optional, technically. Here's where it gets interesting. Completing these requests doesn't pay out in pesetas. It pays out in spinels. Now, in the 2005 game, spinels were just shiny rocks you sold for cash. That's it. The remake repurposes them into an entirely separate currency that buys things pesetas literally cannot. Exclusive upgrade tickets, treasure maps, rare weapon attachments. So now you've got a dual economy running underneath every chapter. Pesetas handle your standard upgrades, spinels gate the genuinely powerful stuff, ignore the requests, and you're leaving real permanent power on the table. But the merchant wasn't done renovating. The shooting gallery comes back too, except now it has multiple stages, harder difficulty tracks, and a gacha style charm system. You play, you win little charms, you slap them onto your attaché case, and they give you passive bonuses. Increased healing from green herbs, merchant discounts, Better crafting yields? It's a full meta progression layer hidden inside a carnival minigame. Some players love this. Others argue the requests pull your attention sideways when the original's greatest strength was its relentless forward momentum. And honestly, both camps have a point, but at least the merchant gives you a choice. Ashley, on the other hand, doesn't give you one at all. Ashley Graham's AI and interaction. Let's just say it. In the original Resident Evil 4, Ashley Graham was the worst part of the game. Not because she was a bad character, not because the story didn't need her, but because her AI had the survival instincts of a blindfolded toddler wandering through traffic. She'd walk directly into your line of fire. She'd stand perfectly still while a ganado sprinted at her with an axe. She'd get grabbed off screen and carried halfway across the map before you even realized she was gone. Every single encounter with Ashley present was less about fighting enemies and more about babysitting someone who seemed actively committed to dying. Players spent entire sections not thinking, how do I survive this, but how do I survive this, while also preventing this woman from standing on top of a bear trap. The remake fixes basically all of it, and it's not subtle about it. Ashley now ducks during firefights. She stays behind Leon. She crouches when enemies get close and actively moves away from danger instead of toward it. You can tell her to stay tight or hang back with a single button press. No menu required. She no longer has a traditional health bar. Instead, she goes into a downed state when she takes too much damage, and Leon has to run over and pick her up. No more burning through your herb supply keeping her alive. No more instant game overs because a stray shotgun pellet clipped her from across the room. But here's where it gets complicated. That old frustration? It was also tension. Terrible, unfair. Controller snapping tension, but tension nonetheless. The original made you genuinely panicked about Ashley's safety because she could die at any moment for basically no reason. The remake replaces that raw panic with something smarter, building dread through level design and enemy placement instead of AI incompetence. It works better, but keeping Ashley alive is only one half of the survival equation. The other half is what you're carrying in that briefcase, and the remake changed that system from the ground up. Inventory and attached case management. Nobody talks about this one, and that's weird, because it quietly changes everything about how Resident Evil 4 actually works. In the original, resources were resources. You found handgun ammo, you had handgun ammo, you picked up a green herb, you had a green herb, zero ambiguity. The entire resource loop was walk into room, pick up thing, put thing in case, use thing when needed. The only decision was whether you had enough room in your attaché case to carry it all. The remake throws that whole model out. Now you're picking up gunpowder and raw resources that don't do anything on their own. You have to combine them. And here's the thing, different combinations produce different results. The same gunpowder that could become shotgun shells could also become handgun rounds or crossbow bolts. Every single pickup is now a question. Not do I have room for this, but what do I turn this into? That sounds small. It is not small. What Capcom actually did is introduce anticipation as a core skill. A player who knows the castle courtyard is coming and crafts shotgun shells in advance is playing a fundamentally different game than someone who panic crafts pistol ammo mid-fight. The original never asked you to think ahead like that. And on higher difficulties, crafting yields drop. The same resources that gave you 15 rounds on standard might give you 10 on professional. So the decision isn't just what to craft, it's when. Then layer the knife repair economy on top. Repairing your knife costs pesetas. Upgrading weapons costs pesetas. Every system feeds from the same resource pool, which means crafting decisions bleed into upgrades, which bleed into knife maintenance, which bleed into how aggressively you parry, which bleed into how much ammo you burn. It's all one loop. The original was a shooter where you managed a briefcase. The remake is a resource management game where shooting happens to be how you spend most of your resources. But the resource loop only tells you so much about how the remake actually feels different. For that, you have to look at the story the game is telling and the people carrying it. Narrative, tone, and character arcs. The original Resident Evil 4 knew exactly what it was. Leon walked into a village full of parasite-infected cultists and responded with the energy of a guy who'd already seen worse and found it mildly inconvenient. Salazar chewed scenery like it was a competitive sport. Sadler monologued with the conviction of a man who genuinely believed his own PowerPoint presentation. The whole thing worked because the game never once pretended it wasn't a B-movie dressed up in survival horror clothing. It was camp. It was intentional, and people loved it for exactly that reason. The remake throws most of that out the window. Leon in 2023 is a fundamentally different character. He's still sarcastic, still capable, but the jokes come less often and land heavier. Raccoon City isn't just backstory anymore, it's something he visibly carries. His banter with Ashley and Luis still exists, but it reads more like coping mechanism than action hero swagger. Luis Serra is where the remake makes its strongest case. In the original, Luis was charming, showed up a handful of times, and then died. That was basically it. The remake gives him an entire arc, his history with the Plaga's research, his guilt over what he helped create, his relationship with Leon. All of it gets real screen time. By the time his story reaches its conclusion, it actually hits. The original implied tragedy. The remake earns it. Salazar and Sadler get the opposite treatment from what you'd expect. Instead of being louder, they're quieter. Salazar trades theatrical tantrums for something colder. Sadler drops the cartoon villain energy for genuine cult leader conviction, which is honestly worse. Here's the thing nobody wants to admit. The original's tone probably couldn't survive a straight recreation in 2023. A shot-for-shot remake of Leon's cheesiest lines with modern production values would feel bizarre. But the loss of that camp is real, and some fans will never forgive the trade. Whether grounded horror was the right call depends entirely on what you loved about the original in the first place. But if the story rewrites changed how the game feels, the level design changes how it plays, and that's a whole different conversation. Village and castle environmental design. The original Resident Evil 4 was a straight line, a beautiful, perfectly paced, relentlessly forward-moving straight line, but a straight line nonetheless. You walked into an area, killed everything, moved to the next area, almost zero reason to backtrack, almost zero optional content, and the environment existed to funnel you from cutscene to cutscene like cattle through a chute. In 2005, nobody complained because that's just how games were built. The remake throws that entire philosophy out a window. The Village region alone is basically unrecognizable. What used to be corridors connecting combat arenas is now a semi-open zone with interconnected sub-areas, optional buildings, destructible environments, and hidden resources tucked into corners. The critical path never asks you to visit. You can spend 20 minutes poking around houses and side paths before touching the main objective. And here's the thing, the game rewards you for it. Crafting materials, weapon components, treasures, all distributed based on how thoroughly you explore. Players who sprint through get the bare minimum. Players who investigate every suspicious door walk out with a meaningfully better loadout. The lake area gets expanded with more boat traversal and additional encounters. The castle sections are rebuilt with more complex geometry, more flanking routes, more verticality, and the island, comfortably the most criticized stretch of the original, is restructured almost entirely. Less repetitive military corridor shooting, more variety. But the quieter change is the environmental storytelling. Notes on tables, observable details in the architecture, set dressing that tells you what happened to this village without a single cutscene. The cult's history is baked into the walls. You don't get told the story, you walk through it. The trade-off is obvious. The original's linearity was its momentum engine. Every second pushed you forward. The remake deliberately slows that down to let you breathe, and whether that's richer immersion or a loss of drive depends entirely on the player. But if you think redesigning entire zones is ambitious, wait until you see what they did to the bosses. Boss battle revisions. The original Resident Evil 4 had boss fights that hit like a truck the first time you saw them. Massive creatures, dramatic camera angles, QTE prompts flashing on screen while something enormous tried to eat you. And honestly, it worked. But it worked exactly once. Because once you knew the gimmick, those fights had the replay depth of a loading screen. The remake fixes this by doing something deceptively simple. It makes you actually fight the bosses. El Gigante is a perfect example. In 2005, you shoot it until it kneels, climb on its back, mash a button, repeat. In the remake, it has a genuine moveset. It tracks your movement, punishes predictable kiting, and its attacks have dodge windows tied to your actual inputs rather than a prompt that pops up like a polite suggestion. You're reading the fight. That didn't exist before. Krauser is where the difference is most visible. The original fight was iconic and also about 90% quick-time event. The remake strips all of that out and replaces it with a proper knife duel. Parry windows, multi-phase escalation, real consequences for mistiming. It's the single best argument the remake makes for its new combat philosophy. Standard enemies got the same treatment. Ganados aren't just more aggressive, they're smarter. They flank, they coordinate. You thin the crowd and the survivors actually adjust their approach rather than shuffling forward like nothing happened. And the Regeneradores. In 2005, they were scary because you didn't know what they were. In the remake, they're scary because you do. The breathing, the way the music shifts when one is nearby, their threat is built on sensory dread rather than a single surprise, which means they're terrifying on your first encounter and your fifth. Some of the original's charm is lost in translation. Absurdity has its own value, but what you get in exchange is fights worth replaying, worth mastering, worth failing at 3 times because the 4th attempt feels earned. And if reworking every major fight sounds like a full overhaul, it is. But Capcom didn't stop there. The remake was always missing one story, and they finally told it. The Separate Ways integration. In the original Resident Evil 4, Separate Ways wasn't part of the initial GameCube release. It showed up later in the PS2 version, a fully playable second campaign following Ada Wong through the same events as Leon's, told from her side. It explained what Ada was actually doing while Leon was being grabbed, shot, and thrown into various dungeons. It worked as a bonus mode, a satisfying one, but still a bonus. The remake turns it into paid DLC, released in September 2023, and the first thing it makes clear is that Ada is not Leon. She has a grappling hook that opens traversal options the entire main campaign never had. She moves through familiar areas but accesses them differently, using geometry that Leon walked past entirely. The same village, castle, and island look different when you're coming at them from entirely new angles. The story weight is where the DLC changes the most. In the original, Ada's motivations were kept deliberately vague. She wanted the Plaga sample. She worked for Wesker, and that was basically the full explanation. The remake expands her arc considerably. Wesker reads as more manipulative, more dangerous, and the dynamic between them reframes what was happening in the background of the main campaign the whole time. Luis Serra's arc, already extended in Leon's campaign, gets further development here too. New boss encounters are built around Ada's moveset specifically, which means the combat system gets tested in configurations Leon's campaign never sets up. Her weapons, her upgrade paths, her whole approach to the same enemies you've already fought sits just differently enough to make Separate Ways feel like a parallel game, not a remix. The original Separate Ways was a few hours of bonus content. The remake version runs significantly longer and carries actual narrative weight. You come away from it understanding things about why certain events unfolded the way they did, things Leon never finds out. The ending hits differently when you know what was happening off-screen the entire time. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.